Hey there friends, welcome to another video. Of course, I am Paul Glasgow with Legally Armed America. Some people have been asking me here recently a little bit more about myself and about who I am. Some newer subscribers that have been coming on board, so I figured I would state that and also let you guys know anytime somebody wants to reach out to me, my email is very easy, paul@legallyarmedamerica.com. Again, paul@legallyarmedamerica.com. Best way to reach me? Really the only way to reach me, to be quite honest. Ask questions, make comments, doesn't matter to me. Send me potential news articles. A lot of you guys out there are really good at sending me news articles. I want to bring to you a free-for-all Friday today. I'm going to start doing something a little bit different on Fridays, and I'm going to mix in regular politics along with Second Amendment stuff, and sometimes it may not even include Second Amendment stuff because it is free-for-all Friday. Today is going to be a mixture of all of that. There's a recent Gallup poll that came out, and the findings are not really surprising to me in a lot of instances, but I was actually surprised how so many Republicans were leaning a new way in some of the more modern issues out there. And I want to make a really quick statement about parties. I do believe that both parties' leadership in Washington, D.C. is all garbage. I think once politicians reach Washington, D.C., they are corrupted and they cannot be trusted. I truly believe that. But when you get down to the belief level, people are still identified as party affiliations. In other words, you may have somebody that doesn't agree, like in my case, with most, if not all, in some cases, of the Republican leadership, but most of my leanings are right-leaning, and they align with a lot of the Republican, at least what the Republican platform should be. Because the problem is, in D.C., they typically don't stand on the platform that we support. They usually lean in a much more moderate, middle, and sometimes far left-leaning area, especially when it comes to guns. Well, this is a pretty interesting poll by Gallup. It's a partisan gaps poll. And what this does is it shows where in 2003, it shows where gaps between significant issues were between the two parties. And again, I'm not talking about the, quote, leadership. I'm talking about the people on the street that vote a particular way. And it shows how they differ quite a bit. So in 2003, someone may have leaned a certain way, but by 2023, 20 years later, that gap has either closed between what the two-party differences were, or they've opened up. Some of these are pretty significant as far as the gaps growing, and some of them, again, I'm surprised that the Republicans who are becoming left-leaning and probably pretty soon jumping ship and going to that other side. Let me get into it. Now, I picked 10 that I wanted to talk about. I believe there were 24 in here, and I didn't have time to bore you guys with all that. Plus, I'm not as interested in every single topic in here. So I picked my top 10, and I'm going to start down at the very bottom with the least significant one. Satisfied with state of race relations. This one right here, as you can see, if you look at the details of where it was in 2003, 2013, and then 2023, you'll notice that the state of race relations was a little bit, I would say, acceptable. Both sides deemed it moderately acceptable. In other words, roughly around that 50%. If you'll notice around 13, that one of them, on the conservative side, the Republican side, started to drop downward. The one on the Democrat side began to rise. That is when Barack Obama was president. So a lot of people, I think, on the left recognized that race relations, you got a black president, so race relations had actually improved. Whereas a lot of people on the right were getting tired of being called racist by our president. So that's why you see that dip. And of course, after 13, everybody wanted to call, at least as you get towards the election with Trump, everyone wanted to call Donald Trump a racist. And of course, by then, Barack Obama had done so much damage already that both sides began to trend downward. So that was one that was not really much of a surprise to me. If you look at where the triggers were being pulled from and who was actually doing the damage in the country, and it's very, very clear. Now, this to me shows a very good indication of government and media being able to team up and drive a narrative that things are worse. Now, I think the atmosphere regarding race is worse. I never thought I would see people calling me a white supremacist when I'm clearly not, and you can go back and look at all of my videos and see where I've supported every single person out there. I'm not one of those guys that says I have a black friend so I'm not racist. I actually have over 10 years of videos that you can go back and look and see. But I'm called racist almost on a daily basis. But again, I'm fortunate enough to have the history in videos to where it can disprove all of that. Unfortunately, I see a lot of our people who, and I'm going to use this word because I'm not afraid to use it because it doesn't apply to a particular race. Many people are willful slaves. They want to be led around. They want a nose ring through their nose and they want somebody to pull them. Why? Because they're too lazy. They're either too stupid, too ignorant, or too lazy to learn and educate themselves on their own. So it's a lot easier to have the media spoon feed them, or better yet, a politician tell them that somebody is racist towards them, so it stokes that fear and makes them angry about that. So that's my first one. Number 9, favor death penalty in cases of murder. Now this is one of them, and I think I have a couple of them in here, that shows that there is clearly a divide between the two classes, the two political parties regarding this. You can see back in 2003, looks like about 75% maybe, probably a little bit more than that, 76% of Republicans favored the death penalty in cases of murder. Now again, this is cases of murder, okay? So you can see that the Democrats were roughly at 50%. Look at 2013, and that number went up a little bit for Republicans, but continued to go down for Democrats, and both of them went down into 2023. What this shows me right there is, and this is a clear-cut case of what's happening in this country right now, lack of accountability. Lack of accountability. You don't want to be held accountable for the things you do. So somebody is sitting out there thinking, well, it might be my friend, my cousin, my brother, just a family member in general, that might get caught up in this. Man, I really don't want them put to death. Lack of accountability. Because most people would understand, most logical people, sane people, would totally understand that, hey man, you go kill somebody and you meant to kill somebody. Now, it doesn't say what degree of murder in here, but if you've killed somebody, personally, I think based on the circumstances, and of course, that's why we have court, that's why we have a trial, that trial should determine if that person would get the death penalty. This question is not saying that every single person that commits a murder should be put to death. That's not what the question says. It's basically stating that if a trial determines that somebody should be put to death because of the heinousness of that crime, then do you agree with that? And this really surprised me that we still have this many people who don't think that a person who commits a heinous murder should be put to death themselves. Again, lacking accountability. Number 8, government should do more to solve the nation's problems. Oh my God, I got to use the term slave again, and I'm going to use lazy with that. This is not a racial term. You are a willful slave and you are downright lazy if you think the government should be solving your problems for you. And not only that, you are ignorant and stupid. Have you seen what the federal government has done trying to solve problems? Are you paying attention? Have you seen anything that's happening out there that leads you? Give me one example of the government solving a problem better than you could have. That tells me that you want that government teat firmly sewn to your lips and you don't want to get away from it because you want the government to solve your problem for you. I'm too lazy to solve my own problem. That's very clear cut. If you disagree with that, please comment in the section below and tell me why you think the government is better equipped at solving your problems. Number 7, income tax you pay is fair. This is another, oh my God. You can tell who has a job and who doesn't have a job. This is so clear cut. This is somebody sitting on the couch with Cheetos up to their elbows, no job, chilling out, watching the stories all day, playing video games, yelling at mom to bring them some more Kool-Aid and some more Cheetos, not working, and realizing that that tax has to come from somewhere. It comes from me, and it comes from you. That person doesn't understand the dynamics of how they got that free cheese, how they got that free rent. They don't understand how they got that EBT card. They don't understand any of that because they're stupid. Their laziness has led them to be stupid. They might be a smart person, but because of their sheer laziness, they are inherently ignorant about pretty much everything. So they don't know how they got all those free things. They just do realize that taxes from people like us is how they got that stuff. They do understand that. So do they think it's fair? Absolutely. You think they're going to admit that they're lazy and they need to get their fat butts off those couches and get a job? No, of course not. They're perfectly happy with the conditions as they exist. That is shameful. That is so shameful to me. And let me just say this. If anybody on the right actually answered that they thought income tax pay is fair, I am ashamed at you. I get it from the people who are willful slaves and blindly taking the handouts from the federal government, and they don't have any choice. They're not wanting to push that food off of their table. It's free, by God, right? But nothing free is free. Somebody has to pay for that. The ones who actually are paying for that, if you agreed with this, something is wrong with you. Moving on up to number 6, gun laws should be stricter. Well, this is not a surprise by any stretch. The gap between the two is 24 points. You'll notice in the 20-year breakdown there that it shows that in 03, obviously, gun laws should be stricter. You've got one party above. That's the Democrats. Of course, they always thought that. That's probably 68, 69% right there. And their numbers continue to climb, obviously, over the years. If you look at the conservatives, this was a little bit concerning to me. This is where emotion comes into play instead of facts. And look, I will be the first one to admit that every single Republican ain't smart. Every single Republican is not a hard worker, and every single Republican is not against being a willful slave. There are plenty of people on the right that will fall into many of those categories that I speak in a derogatory fashion about on the left. So make no mistake, I see a very easy way that these lines are blurred sometimes, and some of these people fall on both sides. In fact, I know down here in the South, I know a lot of Democrats, they call them blue dog Democrats, that have most of the same conservative beliefs that I do, but they vote Democrat. I don't understand why, but they do. We have way more in common than we have not in common, yet they still vote the other way. But what scared me about this number regarding guns is that if you look at the approval of gun laws being stricter, they're probably in 2013, if you really had to look at that, that's probably about 22, 23%. It rose to 31% in 2023. That's scary to me. Again, that shows where some of these people that claim to be on the right are actually left-leaning. It also shows me that, and I hate to say this, but I'm trying to be honest and truthful, it shows me that the politicians, the media, and the anti-gun groups out there are doing a really good job in brainwashing people and training them the way they want them to be trained. This is proof that lying to people can eventually persuade them. If you say the same lies enough, or you frame your question the same way enough, eventually you're going to find the ignorant and weak-minded people who are eventually going to believe or agree with you because they're too stupid and ignorant to know any better. And that's what I see here. We've got people on the right who are believing the rhetoric. And that is scary because that shows that propaganda being spread throughout the country actually works. And all that does is encourage those people to continue to produce that same propaganda. Number 5, immigration should be decreased. This shows me that these people are okay with illegal growth of a voting bloc just in order to win. They don't care how they win. This is clear-cut evidence that these people know that folks are coming across the border illegally, and they should be smart enough to know that all these free handouts and everything that they're getting, that's going to get watered down. At some point, it gets watered down. They're coming to take from the same pool of free stuff that these people sitting on their couches are currently getting. So this shows me that they would rather have control, or at least have their party have control, than them have the things that they have, which is really an ignorant way of thinking, because at some point, if you have less stuff, does it really matter who's in control if you're looking for free handouts? Wouldn't you just want more free stuff? At this point, you can't take free stuff away. So no matter which party is in power, you're going to get the same amount of free stuff, unless the pool of people is so great that that pool of free stuff now gets watered down. So the party in power really shouldn't matter as far as the free stuff, because the people in the Republican Party, they're not going to take your free stuff away. Once you give free stuff, you cannot take it away. So none of that stuff would go away. The only way for it to be lessened is when it gets watered down, because you have so many other freeloaders in that same pool pulling from the same stuff. Abortion should be legal under any circumstance. I'm going to have to go with the no accountability again. This is a group of people that don't want to have any accountability. I'm not going to get into the whole abortion debate right here on this show, but this clearly shows me at the rate people have abortions and the way they celebrate abortions now, which is disgusting. I don't think you should ever celebrate sucking brains out of an unborn child's head. I don't think that that is something that you should run around with a t-shirt saying, I got an abortion. But nevertheless, it's saddening to me that these people have so little accountability. That's not something that a person should want with their body. In other words, there's so many ways of contraception, maybe a little bit of self-control. Things like that might be a good way to just not have to go through that entire abortion process to begin with. But it's celebrated so greatly and at the federal level that I think a lot of people now are starting to shift in that and don't realize that the lack of accountability is really a telling sign in so many other areas of your life. Number 3, completely or somewhat satisfied with K through 12 education in the United States. Folks, let me be very clear about this. Anyone who is satisfied with our failing K through 12 education system is outing themselves as a product of that failed system. In other words, they're stupid. Because the vast majority of our country today, graduates, can't read. The majority of them. Not a couple, not a few. Our education system in the United States is horrendous. Our graduates are stupid. They're not prepared for the world. And I truly believe in my heart that the federal government wants this, because stupid people are a lot easier to control. When you have people who are free thinkers, can think for themselves, intelligent, can do things for themselves, guess what they don't need? The federal government. So the federal government will lose with a positive, high-performing educational system. So the government, more than anybody, has a vested interest to make sure that we continue to graduate dummies out into the world. The next one, human activity is the main cause of global warming. Easily brainwashed people. People that are stupid and lazy, and I know I overuse those terms sometimes, but I mean, do you have a better term? Stupid and lazy. These people would rather get 5 seconds of news, which is essentially a headline every now and then, and think that the sky is falling and that everything you do, from turning a key in ignition to cutting your grass to watering your lawn to heating your stove up, all of that stuff is killing the earth that managed to survive for a lot longer before we ever started doing any of these things, but yet you're directly responsible. I saw a story earlier today that said that July was the hottest July in 120,000 years. I'm wondering how they know that. I think we've had the ability to measure and document degrees, temperatures for not even maybe 100 years. Early 1900s, I believe, is when we could start measuring that. How in the hell do they know how hot the earth was 120,000 years ago? They don't. That's the thing. They don't. They have no idea what the temperature in July was 120,000 years ago. But people will believe that because guess what? It came from a scientist. I'm more sciencier than you. So if they have a scientist next to their name or a title next to their name claiming that they are, everybody believes them. That's how you got all these fools to wear masks and do all kind of other stupid things that have been debunked and proven ineffective. This goes back to number 3, completely or somewhat satisfied with K through 12 education. Most of those people who are stupid enough to think that the education system is a success by graduating all of these dummies who can't read are the same ones who think human activity is the main cause of global warming. And notice they put main cause. Now, I'm not saying the only cause. They're saying the main cause. They're saying that human beings are the main cause for things that happen in our climate. You are absolutely stupid if you believe that we control more of the environment than the environment does, Mother Nature. I can't even believe people think that. But nevertheless, let's move on to number 1. Federal government has too much power. Wow, look at that number. That's a 50-point spread. A 50-point spread between these parties. You tell me who the willful slaves are. Look at these numbers here. You actually had back in 2003, I'm not even sure I can believe this graph, but you had fewer Democrats who had trust in the federal government's power. Look at the amount of conservatives, your Republicans. The Republicans believed more that the federal government didn't have enough power. Then the Republicans woke up, and in 2013, you can see they bypassed the Democrats, and the numbers shot up. Good 80% right there of Republicans did not think the federal government had too much power, or thought that the government had too much power. And of course, you see your Democrats started to drop. Right now, you've got 73% of Republicans who think the federal government has too much power, and only 31% of Democrats who think that. Have you ever seen a bigger group of people who wanted to bend over and spread their butt cheeks for the federal government? Look how much the federal government controls every single aspect in your everyday life, from pulling a permit to building a house. Of course, the guy sitting on the couch doesn't care about that, right? He's not building his own house. He's living off the government. To anywhere from drilling for gas in order to make our gas prices cheaper. Again, the guy on the couch doesn't care about that, because the federal government's paying for all of his stuff, paying for him to get around. And in most cases, they live in larger communities where they just walk to wherever they want. It's the working class people who are paying for that gas. Almost every single thing you could possibly touch is getting taxed. Federal government's getting their cut. How could anybody, anyone, I don't care what party you are, how could anybody on the left think that the government needs more power unless you are totally happy with the conditions you live under? And the problem is, and this is kind of a sick, sinister way of people looking at it, that tells me that you're also happy with the people like me and you. Those people are happy with us getting hammered and having to provide everything for them. You see how much that says about somebody? When somebody is okay with me and you getting hammered on a regular basis, busting our asses, working twice as hard, working 2 and 3 jobs, working longer hours, and this person sleeps until noon, plays video games until 2 o'clock in the morning, and that cycle just starts all over again. Do you not see how sinister that is of that person? Maybe they're oblivious of it and they don't want to think about it because maybe they will get a little bit of guilt. So it's possible they're just ignorant of the whole process. But those that know it, and there's plenty who know it, that tells you a lot about their character. They're perfectly okay seeing you sweat and seeing that car or hearing that car door close at 5 o'clock in the morning whenever you're loading up to go to work, and hearing that door close at 5 or 6 o'clock whenever you show back home in the evenings, and then they hear the lawnmower crank up and you're cutting your own grass, when they haven't left the couch or the house at all that day. You see what I'm talking about? Boy, that really says a lot about a person's soul whenever they can watch that happen in front of their very eyes and never feel any guilt about it, and then go answer a poll like this the way they did. Tells you a lot about your fellow brothers out there, doesn't it, guys? Let's stick together. I think there's fewer and fewer. The numbers show that there's fewer and fewer of us as time goes on. I think the last I saw was 47% of the American public gets some form of a handout over time. These numbers are only going to increase, especially whenever we have people like who's in power right now, giving free handouts, relieving everybody of their debt and any of their own responsibilities. It's a sign of the times, man.
God save the Queen, man.
I'm sorry, I thought this was America.